reviewing the play. Flyer to the runner, getting the ball across the goal line. The ball is punched out. It's recovered by the defense in the end zone. It's going to be a touchback for Houston.
Over the middle, and it is intercepted. Did Lonnie Johnson make the catch? He did. It's a flea flicker. Mills looking deep for Culley. He's got him! Touchdown! Folks, kick is good with 15 seconds remaining.
And welcome to episode 101 of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles, and another Texans defeat to talk about as we're kind of become accustomed to in this 2021 season. Not even a leakage up the middle as it was described, or the prayers of Jack Easterby on the sidelines as you saw the field goal go by in the dying minutes of a botched clock management. But joined this week and a Turn Up For What regular back on the radio, I'm glad to see, where he belongs on your airwaves at 97.5 Houston, host to the Wheelhouse, Mr. Cody Stoots. How you doing?
Man, I'm fantastic. 101, man, that's awesome. I can't believe I'm the first in the new century of episodes. So I appreciate that. We always have fun chopping it up about this team.
Yeah, definitely. I wish the product on the field could be a little better. Just side note, actually, mate. I've had it's predominantly the Reddit trolls, really, but I've had a lot of flack for the name recently, and people keep saying, "Are you going to change it? Should you change it to WATT or change it to WHAT for what?" I'm of the opinion that I'm going to stick with it. What do you think? I'm taking a straw poll, I think, every week now.
Hey, you've established a brand here. You can't change it now. And plus, he's only going to be a member of the Cardinals for a few years, and then eventually they'll put him in the Ring of Honor, and you'll have his name on the side there up at NRG Stadium. So, yeah, I mean, look, he's a member of the Cardinals right now, but he'll always be a member of the Texans, and plus, it's a great name. I mean, forget the haters. You get your 101 in. Too late to change now.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. I think people that say that, don't probably engage or listen much, and so I think, yeah, no, fine. That's you've affirmed my beliefs, Cody. So I'm going to keep testing that out every week. But I suppose, as I always tell people, it's a rhetorical question. And thoughts of why did I do this to myself? I suppose it was another fitting game, and I think there's going to be a lot of those this year. But overall takeaways from Sunday against the Patriots, 25-22. It just felt like second half a game squandered.
Yeah, David Culley cost this team a game with the decision-making that he put together for this team. I mean, you come out of halftime and Davis Mills hits that flea flicker pass, and you're like, okay, wow, like they might have enough to put the Patriots away. And at that point, like, okay, if they can run the football a little bit, they just stay within themselves, and they have a chance to win this football game and really upset a team that was not actually very good. I mean, this Patriots team is not a very good football team, but compared to them, they're a very good football team. So they had a chance to upset them, and David Culley's decision-making let this thing just slip away. I mean, the defense had played really well when he decided to fake a fake punt. I mean, the defense had played pretty well when he decided to kick a 56-yard field goal, even though the kickers never kicked a 56-yard field goal. And is it likely the Texans could have marched down the field, scored a touchdown and an extra point, and tied the football game with 2 minutes left? I don't know. Probably not. It's probably not, but it certainly is a better chance 2 minutes down 7 points than 15 seconds down 3 points. So I was really disappointed with David Culley in the second half. I don't have a problem with the way he operated things in the first half, but the second half really let the game get away. It squandered what is probably one of the best games Davis Mills has ever played in his life. I went back and looked at some of his Stanford numbers, and I mean, this is just – it's one of the best games he's played in a very long time, maybe the best game he's ever played, and it just got squandered by the head coach's decision-making in unnecessary decisions in some of those situations.
Yeah, so we'll come back to Mills there, but I think the point of Culley skipping ahead a little bit, let's dive into it now. I think that for me, I think when you saw, and look, I think it feeds into the Mills point, going for it on fourth down, a lot of conversions, big conversions on fourth. The 4th and 2 where Conley took you into the red zone, didn't convert. I think that was a big swing. But for me, like when we're watching it right at the end, you'd shit the bed in the second half. You couldn't do anything at all on offense. When you did, you make a terrible call. And I think when you make that call to kick a 56-yard field goal for a guy who hadn't kicked it, as you said, never kicked it in his career, had already missed 2 PATs. To be fair, I've just looked at all 22. The first one is a bit of a dodgy hold, I think, by Cameron Johnson, but the second PAT definitely on Fairburn. To go for that point of view, to go for the field goal there, when a couple of weeks earlier against Carolina, you punted.
Yep. That's really frustrating. Be consistent. Well, if you're going to be aggressive, be consistently aggressive. Don't pick and choose the points when you want to be aggressive. And in that moment, again, your defense had played really well. The likelihood that Mac Jones is marching them down the field, 90 something yards and scoring a touchdown there is pretty low. And you got to trust this punter. I mean, the punter's been one of the better players on the team. I understand that maybe he mishit, David Culley saying he mishit on the fake punt. But at that moment, still trust the guy to pin him deep. And at the very least, you're looking at 80 yards in front of the Patriots instead of, 60 something. You don't want to give them those free yards. And you don't want to give them that juice. And a lot of momentum left the building when Fairbairn misses that. And again, it's a guy coming off IR who missed 2 extra points, who kicked the ball out of bounds. We still don't know if he's 100%. I mean, I assume they think he's 100%. And I get that he made it in practice, but he's never made one in a game. You can't be attempting that field goal.
Yeah, and then, okay, fair enough, you go for the point. You needed something at that stage, and it was a 4th and 4 that left themselves with some kind of questionable, mix. I think that we'll come on the offense, but I think the offense led us to that point of getting some questionable play calls against a team who are not good at defending the run. But when they scored with 1:56 to go, to decline that penalty and then give some complete BS review of it in the post media. And I know we changed his stance on it again, which is great. Honesty's great, but we're not really paying him for honesty. We're paying him to make in-time game calls that's going to help this team to win. And he reduced this team's chance to win. But to not have the awareness to go and let them score at 1:56, you saw Cleveland do it to the Chargers on Sunday on the late slate. They barreled the guy into the end zone just to get the ball back.
Yeah, they didn't. Cleveland didn't let the Chargers score. They made the Chargers score. That's what's frustrating about this with David Culley is he's a first-time head coach, and I understand that, and I understand sometimes the decision-making is a little iffy, and he's got to learn from his mistakes. I understand that, but Lovie Smith's a former head coach, and he's been coaching for a very long time. Romeo Crennel's a former head coach. He's been coaching for a very long time. And Nick Caserio is supposed to be this genius, analytical, forward-thinking guy, and he's been coaching / in the front office for a very long time. And when you combine that with David Culley, between those 4 individuals, Lovie Smith, Romeo Crennel, David Culley, and Nick Caserio, there's over 150 years in football between college and pros. 150 years between those 4 guys. So tell me why everybody sitting at home, everybody in the press box that I was talking to knew you were supposed to let the Patriots score there for a better chance to tie the game or maybe win the football game. But 150 plus years of coaching and front office experience didn't know that. That's unacceptable. I get that David Culley is a rookie head coach. I understand that. And that guy's going to make some mistakes. But you have guys who are not rookie head coaches who can't let him make those mistakes. And so as much as I want to blame David Culley and the poor explanation and him not being able to remember exactly how it went down, I'm also placing blame on Lovie Smith, Romeo Crennel, and Nick Caserio, because those are the adults, those are the experienced guys in the room, and that should not be happening to their rookie head coach when they have a say in things.
It seems like Frank Ross is the one sort of explaining things to him. When the broadcast cuts to the sideline, he cuts a sort of an individual of somewhat in a confused state. Ross is trying to tell him, I don't know if that's been radioed down from the booth from Caserio or Crennel or whoever's up there, a mixture of the two. And then he still gets it wrong. But what kind of irks me is, okay, you can make split decision calls, but that wasn't a split decision call because it was timeouts. There was, it was a slow process. That last 2 minutes on the clock took a long time for it to click down. But the fact that when you go into a press conference, when you've got the Surface tablets on the sideline, you can see what happens. Like, you would have surely looked at that punt again and saw, the hitting off the guy's back, and he claimed it was, basically they broke contain up the middle in terms of their blocking formation when they're punting. But I think when you go in front of the media, and I've not even kind of briefly looked at it, and it just feels like it's a rabbit in the headlights. And I said that to the guy who was watching the game on Sunday. I just said, I just think he's well out of his depth, and we all feared that. But Sunday was the biggest, perhaps, showing of it, and it kind of just feels like, and it just has an inevitability about it. I think that you felt like this would happen.
Well, the tough part is, and compare David Culley to, but I can watch Sean McVay go in an interview, recall a play from high school. He can tell you who I was on the field, what the play call was, what the down and distance was. And I'm just like, that's, 20 something years ago from Sean McVay, and David Culley can't remember 30 minutes ago. Like that's really unfortunate. And I understand why David Culley is here. David Culley's not here because he's some mastermind offensive or defensive genius or some, expert special teams guru who you just have to respect for his mind for the game. David Culley's here to establish a culture for this organization, a culture for this team. And I understand that. I know why they want that, because the culture post Bill O'Brien was not very good. And they felt like they needed to improve it. And they trust David Culley with that opportunity in that situation. I get that. But all those players have to believe in David Culley, and you have to believe that he can establish that culture. And the quickest way to get those guys in business, now this is not just life, in business, the quickest way to get a superior, lose your respect, is the superior proves he doesn't know what's going on. He proves to you that he's out of his depth. He proves to you that he can't do the job that's been assigned to him. It's really tough for a superior to set the tone for your team when he proves that he's having a tough time doing his job. So they have got to fix that, because eventually you're going to get 53 guys plus a practice squad that aren't going to buy into the culture conversation, because the other 6 days, they matter. They don't matter as much as game day and what you do on game day. And if David Culley looks lost on game day, the other 6 days, it's going to be a lot harder with that culture conversation.
Yeah, and it's something that they've hidden behind consistently. But when you're given dumb penalties, like the Titus Howard false start in the red zone right at halftime, when if you'd got a 7 there, it's a different comment. You might got a 6 with the way Fairbairn was going, but if you get at least more than a field goal at that stage, then you've got a bigger chance in the second half. You had that huge turnover. All the momentum was on your way when, 9 times out of 10, or if you'd been up in Foxborough, you probably don't get that forced fumble from Terrence Mitchell, and you've got all the momentum. You're going into the second, you go into the second half with the points. But I just think with Culley, you wonder how long can he continue to do this, and I think because and we'll come on to there was a very sort of grueling image at the end on the broadcast. We'll finish off on that. But when you saw when you just saw how much those bad calls that he's in charge of impacted the team, as you said, the belief starts to drain away. We're starting to give terrible penalties away. We'll be inconsistent. Tackling's definitely gone back in the last couple of weeks. So all the hardcore fundamentals that these guys were going to do, the basics, be organised, going to be competitive, competition, team. All this stuff is completely eroded by making balls up like that, those kind of calls. So you wonder, and I think it was probably epitomised by the special teams and Frank Ross. And what did you make of that, Cody? Because I think it promised, or it certainly teased people to thinking it might be the strength of the team, but certainly it was your biggest weakness on Sunday.
Hey man, I'm watching this team all during training camp and even early on in the season, maybe the first week certainly. And I kept saying to myself and thinking to myself, it's a really well coached team. This is a team that's coached much better than Bill O'Brien coached football teams. And you're right, that's sort of eroded over the past few weeks. And I think the biggest example and the juxtaposition of it is you look at Sunday, and my big belief was this offensive line was going to be a solid unit. And it's disappointed throughout this course of the season, but the Patriots run 4 backup offensive linemen out there and they don't miss a beat. The Texans have had their hand-picked 5 starters since training camp started, and it doesn't look good on the offensive line. Lovie Smith and the tackling. Hey, Lovie, they're going to throw into the zone that you create. Maybe switch up the look a little bit here, change some things up. I think Tim Kelly's done a nice job. Sunday was a great Tim Kelly time, but Frank Ross having a tough time with the special teams right now, especially when, Andre Roberts' decision-making doesn't help the team very often. We've seen that over the course of the season so far. And then from David Culley had a moment. How do you fix penalties? And he's like, well, we're going to go back to fundamentals. Okay. So that's just another way to say, well, I got to coach better, which was what Bill O'Brien said. Here's how you fix penalties. If guys keep making mistakes, other guys get the opportunity. to see if they don't make the mistake. That's how you fix penalties. Yeah, you got to coach them up and you got to coach better in fundamentals and so on and so forth. But at some point, it's not the coach making the mistake, it's the player. And you got to have that hard conversation with the player. You got to have that hard conversation with yourself about the player. It's a disappointing coaching staff more often than it's a successful coaching staff. But I know there's positives in there. That's the frustrating part. Like if I had not seen any positives, I wouldn't be as frustrated with this team. But I know there's positives in there, and they just can't draw them out on a consistent basis.
I think what the challenge, you touched on the offensive line, and it was like I made a list of the stuff this week before I sent you an agenda of stuff I didn't want to talk about. Because every week so far it's been you can't run the ball, offensive line can't block, even first and second level. I watched the first drive on the all-22. The pad levels all over the place as one bit sharpens. His feet are further forward than his shoulders, getting driven back by one of their, which hadn't been a good run defense at all. Special teams are net negative. Andrew Roberts has just reaffirmed or come out the ashes of DeAndre Carter. We seem to, why in Desmond King going back there, just mix it up a little. We can't rush the passer for shit when we only rush 4 up front. It's the same stuff every week, and the biggest one is the fucking big massive holes in the zone that Kirksey doesn't get enough depth. Every time they set in a pass set and they drop it in, you saw Hunter Henry pick up multiple balls in there. And the zone coverage, for whatever reason, and I think it was personified on the Hunter Henry touchdown when there was a safety in behind. I can't remember who it was now. In behind Terrence Mitchell, he's got the leverage inside, so therefore, but then for whatever reason, Terrence Mitchell then decides to position himself on the inside and give him the outside for a clear throwing lane for Mac Jones to take. And it was just like, we still don't have this down at this stage. And I think with all those things, I think a lot of them, particularly the run game, the zone coverage and defense, 2 fundamental flaws on either side of the ball, I don't think we're going to fix them with this personnel, because whatever the coaching staff are trying, it's not getting through. And I think they're just going to be consistent themes right from now until week 17.
The tough part for me is, when you look at the rushing attack, I think that your big flaw is Titus Howard's not a guard. It doesn't seem like he's capable of playing that position as well as he played tackle. Yeah. But you've gotten good tackle production out of Charlie Heck in the preseason and through one game. And before that, look, Marcus Cannon, the time we had with him at right tackle, Titus was better at right tackle than Marcus Cannon looked this year. So it's really frustrating that they've moved Titus Howard around. And it's also really frustrating that he didn't get hardly any left tackle snaps. Now that Laramie Tunsil may miss a little time with the hand, or potentially could miss time with the hand, Titus should be playing left tackle when Laramie Tunsil's down. That's the position. He's a tackle. That's why he was drafted. He's drafted as a tackle. He's not a guard. He's not a center. He's a tackle, right or left tackle. And this is a guy that has the athleticism and sort of the body type to be multiple, but they decided to play him at guard. Well, they maybe decided to play him at guard because Lane Taylor is not healthy and hasn't been healthy yet. He's on the practice squad, just kind of hanging out. And that was a guy that they were maybe counting on to be a guard. So you jack up Titus this season by moving him to a new position, and you sort of weaken your overall production from the outside standpoint to try to help the inside. And all of a sudden the inside's kind of similar to what it was last year. Not necessarily from a pass rush standpoint, but they're not getting push on the inside. And then from Lovey's guy, Lovey just doesn't have enough talent to work with this stuff. You think about some of the successful Lovey Smith defenses, and there was an extreme amount of talent on some of those defenses. And he just doesn't have an extreme amount of talent on defense. And so he's trying to build something with, straw and paper mache and gum and glue. And he does not have wood and nails and brick and mortar, to put this thing together. So I think he's doing the best he can, but I'm not gonna be super critical of the defense, because I think they've probably overperformed at least for a couple of weeks here now. But this offense has got to get, you got to get moving on a more consistent basis on the ground, because Davis Mills, as good as he played, I don't think he can do that every single week. And certainly now that he's shown it, teams might be a little bit more ready for him. So you're going to have to run the football.
Yeah, well, what do you think of Davis Mills' performance then? I think, because I suppose there was a lot of kind of plays where they went for it on fourth, which was great in the first half. The second half, it showed up a bit ugly. And look, the stats, as you said, like complete outliers of his curve, if you like, through from what you've seen of him in his limited college snaps. So, the hope is there's a ceiling, and of course everybody wants him to work out well. He would be the biggest momentum changer for rebuilding this roster if he is the guy. It's still tough to see it, I think, based on what he's shown, but certainly it showed that he can be serviceable, and I think that's about his ceiling. But what did you make of his improved performance? I didn't think it was sustainable, though, all the late down conversions, and he still misses a lot of easy passing and stuff. But do you look at him now any differently after that performance than you did prior?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I was talking with somebody about this before the game last week, and I said, the big thing that I need to know from Tim Kelly and Davis Mills is, do they have a big enough sample size to dig in, assess how Mills has been playing, and improve things? Because heading into Carolina, he had 2 quarters of work. You couldn't really change a lot on a short week. You had to just barely get him ready for the game. Well, heck, heading into Buffalo, you didn't have a lot of experience for Davis Mills. Like, he had not played a tremendous amount of football. He played at that point 6 quarters in the NFL. And so you're like, have you had enough to look at, dig in, and really start to change things and adjust things? And I thought with 10 quarters of work, it looked like Tim Kelly and Davis Mills had enough time to look through, change, alter, fix some things. And now they've got 14 quarters worth of work, so they can continue to change and alter things. And you mentioned the fourth down things. Look, that's not sustainable. You're absolutely right. But I love the fact that they trusted him enough to make those plays on fourth down. That's something that they probably would not have done against Carolina, something they probably would not have done against Buffalo, and maybe even something they wouldn't have done unless they had to against Cleveland in that second half. But to trust that against the Patriots, I think that's a big step forward. That shows they're trusting him. That shows that he has earned that trust in a short amount of time. So I think that's a big positive. You mentioned some of the easy throws. It's really tough because Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, they miss an easy throw. You can say, okay, well, they're super talented. We know they're going to make a tough throw. We know they're going to make a difficult throw to make up for it. I don't know that that's the case for Mac Jones. When you're a later round pick, you don't get the benefit of the doubt when you do something when you don't do something easy. When he messes up a screen pass, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. A first round pick does. As a third round guy, you don't get that opportunity. So he can't mess up easy stuff. Look, I know you're not going to nail every throw, but some of those easy ones have got to be completion. Some of those things that are 4 or 5 yards short of Cooks need to be on Cooks and let Cooks try to make a play. But overall, really impressive performance. It's not like he's got a super great arm. I mean, it's not like it's not Stafford where he can just zing it and he can do whatever he wants from a power standpoint. But there was improvement, there was production, and coming off of Buffalo, I don't know that anybody would have expected that. And I think, too, doing it against a New England defense that was fresh off of a frustrating Tom Brady performance, I thought that was a very good performance. Look, fifth rookie quarterback since 2000 to go for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns against Bill Belichick's defense. And that was in the first half. Like, that's a good performance by Davis Mills. Now, build on it. The small issues that we saw, fix those. Make that performance even better. When they're going to have to adjust in game going forward. People are going to see, see what they've done, going to have success against them early, and then Tim Kelly and him are going to have to adjust in game. There's a little something there. The likelihood that he's the guy, it's a very, very small slice of the potential outcomes, but it's still there. I'm not ready to totally write it off. One of the potential outcomes is Davis Mills is the guy. He showed us that there's a potential outcome where that's the case. Is it the most likely outcome? No, it's not. But there's at least that potential outcome still alive, and we need to continue to see that. Not going to be any Tyrod this week. It's going to be a Colts team that, is up and down. So let's see you build on it, Davis Mills. I think that's the most important thing is he rebounded, and now he's got the build. I think he actually kind of set level with Buffalo, and now it should be all up from here. You can't really take steps back. You can't go down. It needs to be building from this moment on if you're Davis Mills.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot, there's a lot there, and I think what's almost frustrating at times is, there was one where he bounced it off the turf to Cooks on the first drive when Mark Ingram's, waving his arms at him, leaking out late just to drop him into the flat, and easy passes like that keep the chains moving. You don't need to take 18 play drives, 9 minutes off the clock, because like just mentally and physically for everybody on that offense, it's not the way to play. You want to keep your defense off the field, but that's an extreme. You can't be taking 9 minutes to put up 6 points. So I think there's a lot to like there at times, and then there's some really fundamental basics that you hope he improves upon, just because he's just not had the volume of snaps, live action snaps to improve upon those kind of small but easy fixes. So I think it's good. I think there's a lot of people want to anoint him, and I think obviously the Watson factor and all that kind of stuff, plays in this massively, for everybody. This is not a level playing field. This is not normal circumstances by any stretch. It's all a bit weird. It's all a bit unprecedented. So, in the face of a disaster in Buffalo, and it was bad, it was unwatchable, it was good to see, but obviously then what you have is in the second half is the better coaching staff make the adjustments, and they put the clampers on him a little bit, and I think it's up to him to see that and read and react a little bit more. And I think there's times where you don't want to try and juke past Matt Judon in the red zone, but literally the play before that, it bounced off the hands of Moore and Chris Moore, and it was a flag on JC Jackson, but just small plays like that either way, those numbers could have been a lot better. But I think in the second half, when they were really bringing it to him, he froze a little bit, and perhaps he's processing, I think, in times lets him down, and his ball placement needs to improve. So it's things he can work upon, I suppose, and on the grand scheme of it. But certainly a step forward, and Davis has got he's got a lot of kinks to work out, I think, if he's going to be considered a prospect.
That's the tough part about that performance, is you could still pick out some like very clearly has not played a tremendous amount of football moments. And I think you brought it up there, the red zone, and Mills even mentioned it after the game. Not only did he feel like he messed up the protection from a call standpoint, he also tried to do too much and took them, out of some comfortable situations where they could take more shots into the end zone, where they felt like they had more plays. Like he took them out of those situations and they had to settle for less. More catches that, things are a little bit different, obviously. But, for Mills to have those issues in the red zone, that's something that, like, maybe the first thing I'd be drilling down if I was Tim Kelly, like, hey, do not try to do too much. Throw the ball away. Like, I understand that you can make a play, but when it's Judon breathing down your neck, you're not getting away. Okay, this isn't high school football in Atlanta where you can outrun somebody. This isn't the Pac-12 where you might be able to outrun somebody. Judon's getting you. These guys are going to get you. Throw the ball away and live to fight another day. Look, Lamar Jackson loses 9 yards. He can make it up. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, these monsters that are out there, Herbert, they lose 9-8 yards. They can make it up in a hurry. Davis Mills in this offense can't. You can't make up negative yards. So you can't. It's really hard for this team if he's going to mess up in those situations and add to the already tough task of moving the football. That's one of the big things for him. And look, I think he will improve that. I think that's just experience, reps. Hey, slap on the hand. Don't do that anymore. And I think he will improve that, because we saw a big jump in what he can improve with the reps to dive in and really look at and really pay attention to. So I do have a little faith that he's going to improve those things.
Yeah, and in terms of the rest of the squad, Cody, I suppose we're trying to find pieces for future years. Any stand? I think Jonathan Greener continues to flash, which is so frustrating, because he got no snaps last year. And ironically, he was a pick that kind of fell in their lap that infamously I don't think they would have made otherwise. But any other standouts? I thought he was the one I had, and Chris Moore, I think, as well. But anyone else? My
favorite part about Grenard is Bill O'Brien didn't want him. So I know he's probably a really good football player if Bill O'Brien didn't want him. I think that's my favorite fact about John Grenard. I like his mentality too. Listening to him post game, I think his head's screwed on right. This is a guy that comes from, he played his last season in Florida, and before that was at Louisville. He's played some big time football and didn't lose a bunch. Okay, so I think losing is tough for him. And when you think about how guys handle losing, I like Grenard's mentality. I like Ross Blacklock's mentality before, his season got kind of interrupted here a little bit. So I really like Grenard. Terrence Mitchell is a guy that, Brady targeted him in the preseason game, and we kind of were like, this could be a little iffy here. But he's played pretty well in the regular season. Terrence Mitchell, I think he's one of the guys that has a multi-year contract, so he's going to be a guy that factors in for you. Desmond King, I like what Desmond King's brought to the table. I liked him as the kick returner, punt returner. He was amazing in the slot in preseason. I think mixed results in the regular season, but now he's been playing outside. Desmond King's a guy that I really like. Malik Collins, from a week-to-week standpoint, has kind of played himself in and out. The rough in the passer penalty, like, iffy call, I suppose, but they call that now, so you can't make that mistake. KGH, Camus Grugier Hill, absolutely should be on the football team going forward. I really like what he's brought to the table. That's a guy that Lovie Smith seems to trust. I'd even think about Christian Kirksey long-term, just have a veteran that Lovie trusts long-term standpoint. And I thought the secondary played okay, from the standpoint of the two safeties and the two corners that you regularly see. Reed's fine. Lonnie Johnson has his ups and his downs. I think there's some times where he's just out of position in Lovie's defense. Just have patience. I love Hector more. I would expect him to be getting more opportunities while Nico goes down. I would keep him getting those opportunities even when Amendola's back, just because, I know that they thought Danny might be ready. He wasn't ready. So they bring more up, I think, in place of Amendola not being ready. I think even when Amendola's ready, you bring more up because he made some big plays for you. Give Davis Mills that option. Give him that opportunity so you can put 3-4. I do want Justin Britt back. The next week, I want him to draft the center out of Iowa so we don't have to worry about center for 10 years. So it's
is it Tabram or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Linderbaum, maybe I think is his name.
Linderbaum, sorry.
Yeah, Linderbaum. And so it's like a lot of these guys are week to week. I think who puts together multi-week performances is really what I pay attention to. And that's KGH. That's John Grenard. That's Terrence Mitchell at this point. Together 3-4 weeks. And let's see you stack those together. And then we can think about you long-term. But Terrence Mitchell, Desmond King, KGH on the defensive side, even Kirksey, I'm thumbs up on those guys hanging around. And, maybe some late round rookies are challenging them, 2 years from now for their spots, or a year from now, late in the season for their spot. But yeah, I think they found a couple of pieces, and that's what we said Caserio had to do. So mission accomplished a little bit on that standpoint.
Yeah, and I suppose it was an interesting one. One way I didn't actually pick up last week. What did you make of the Anthony Miller getting cut? I saw Lonnie Johnson taking him out for his birthday on Sunday night. It's looked a bit kind of I feel a bit sorry for him. I don't think he did much to warrant it. Everybody was positive about his performances in training camp. He got a touchdown on Thursday Night Football, caught a couple others, looked pretty zippy across the slot. But when we're talking about, it almost kind of goes in the face of building spots for future years. But actually, when you side with a 35, 36-year-old vet wearing a pair of very short shorts on the sideline when you saw him, and Danny Amendola, it seemed a kind of an odd one. And I suppose Culley's honesty almost kind of bases it, well, we thought he was a better guy. He was effectively the way he articulated it in so many words. So what did you make of that? Because it felt like Miller might have been somebody you could have developed.
What David Culley told us and what the context clues tell us are a little bit different. If they knew there was even a slight chance that Danny Amendola couldn't go on Sunday, they shouldn't have cut Anthony Miller. Unless it just wasn't working. I mean, this is a guy that had every opportunity in Chicago and fell out of favor. And so, obviously, he's a younger guy. Obviously, long-term, he could be more useful than Danny Amendola. But the fact that Amendola wasn't even for sure a go, and they decided they wanted him out of the building, I think tells us a little bit about Anthony Miller, more so than about the decision-making of the Texans. Because, look, I was with you. Young guy that you spent a 5th-round pick on. He's not even going to get the opportunity to continue playing, to show you if he can make it work, especially when the veteran's going to be out. I was a little bummed that he wasn't going to get that opportunity. But when Amendola wasn't even ready to go on Sunday, that kind of told me, okay, maybe there's more than just the on-the-field situation with Anthony Miller. And, I don't know anything. Nobody's told me anything. I'm not reporting anything, but I think the context clues tell you they were comfortable not having Anthony Miller in the building, even if Danny Amendola wasn't ready to play on Sunday.
Yeah, I suppose it's a strange one, isn't it, when you go out and make an aggressive trade for a guy who probably might have hit waivers and then give up on him so quickly. So, was the Was the talent evaluation so different from the personality evaluation?
Bingo. You can't squander those late round picks like Caserio has been doing. 5th for Anthony Miller, 7th for Ryan Izzo. What was it? A 6th for Kadar Holman, who, did he even get in the building? Before they moved on from him. I'm fascinated by that with Caserio, because this is a guy that comes from an organization that found the greatest quarterback of all time with a 6th round pick. And you would think he'd want to keep those that ammunition on his side, as opposed to taking the risk and chance of a rookie paying off in that situation than a veteran who has failed somewhere else is much higher. Like, the chance that the rookie pays off when you draft him and nail it is higher than the veteran paying off when you go get him off of another team. So I think I'd like to see Caserio maybe hang on to some of those late round picks and take a few more swings. And so it's not a tremendous amount of 1-year veterans. It's maybe a little bit larger amount of young guys filling out this roster.
Yeah, and I suppose a guy who will be lost this week, or potentially this week, is Laremy Tunsil. Obviously, he's not by no fault of his own. A big part of the reason why we're kind of in a rebuild mode with limited picks. What did you make of his kind of? It reminded me with Ken. Do you remember when Kenny Stills went off on the sideline week 4 before O'Brien got fired? Looked completely disinterested, and then gets cut a week or leaves a couple of weeks later, and says it was nothing to do with playing time. He just wanted out. He just sort of stood there a bit kind of, and I don't know if that's just him as a guy, reasonably laid back, wearing a nose piercing, which I'm not a fan of, standing on the sideline, kind of holding his hand. Yeah, they oddly put him out for a field goal unit or a punt unit, I can't remember which one, but he wasn't good enough to go, and Gary and Christian plays the rest. But I thought that was interesting. And sometimes his body language, particularly in the run game, doesn't look great when you've got so much. Look, he will always be over-criticised because you've got far too much resource than you should ever put into any player beyond the quarterback. But I just thought he at times, and that injury there, I think he got trampled on his, and it'll be a sore one, and for his alignment it'll be difficult to play. But yeah, I don't know if he's one of those ones you just tell him to get the surgery now and go, look, it's not going to make a great difference. Because I didn't think that the line play is already so bad. Is it academical that he just gets healthy now, and then you look to maybe keep him, or do you look to move on from? I don't know, but I just thought it was an interesting facet of the game where he went off, standing there looking semi-disinterested on the sideline without a lot of loss on the field.
The thing with Laremy Tunsil, and I say this, and I don't think this is a bad thing about Laremy Tunsil, he's a mercenary. Laremy Tunsil is going to go wherever the highest amount of money pays him, and he's going to play, and he's going to be pretty good. Okay, and at times he's going to be great. Myles Garrett has had basically one poor performance this season, and it was when Laremy Tunsil was blocking him. He has those moments. He's not a great run blocking left tackle, but he's really good against pass rush, and so that's why you kind of have Laremy Tunsil there, and that's why Bill O'Brien wanted to invest all that into him. If they could trade him right now for something, I think they would. I just don't think they can fiscally, like financially.
Yeah.
It would be very irresponsible to make that move, just from what they'd have to pay to trade him and things like that. In the offseason, I absolutely think they'll explore moving on from Laremy Tunsil. And I don't know if they feel like they have the future left tackle on the roster, or they want to go get that future left tackle, or they want to have a veteran there, or they want to use a draft pick on it. I don't know. But I do believe they'll explore trading Laremy Tunsil and just trying to maximize his value, because somebody may give you a first-round pick for him. You're not going to get 2 firsts and a second, which is what you paid for him. And so Nick Caserio will get killed for that. But in the long run, by the time Laremy Tunsil, you'd have to pay him again. That's maybe when your rookie quarterback is just actually getting going. So it's like you find yourself into a weird spot where, okay, if you've invested in a rookie, you want to pay all those other guys because you have the money to, because it's a rookie quarterback, but you may be 2 years away from really kind of accelerating, or maybe 3 years away from accelerating, and that could be a giant Laremy Tunsil contract again. I do believe they'll try to trade him in the offseason. I don't read too much into his body language, his mood, his mentality, because I just don't think Laremy Tunsil has positive body language. I don't think Laremy Tunsil has positive facial reactions. I think he's a mercenary, and I think when he can't play football and make his money, he's not going to look happy. And he has a very laissez-faire appearance to him a lot of times. But when the guy goes out there and stymies one of the best pass rushers, that's why you pay him all that money. It's a weird situation. It's tough. I don't know why he would play through it. I'd get the surgery if I was him. But at the same time, credit to him. He's a warrior. If he's going to play through a whole season for this team, that's a guy that cares a little bit more than probably most people, myself included, thought, if he's going to play through that, because he certainly doesn't have to. He gets paid. He's hurt. He gets paid. So he can sit on the sideline, get the surgery, and be ready for next year, potentially a different team. So I'm not super bummed about Laramie Tunsil. It's kind of a bummer how he got here, but I think he's a really nice player. I'm fine with it. You have 2 more years on the contract. Then maybe you franchise tag him and try to trade him, or you get a comp pick for him leaving. Or if you try to trade him in the offseason, I'm fine with that opportunity too.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, as you said, it's not normal circumstances with all the kind of skullduggery that's going on in the background. But I think it just was an interesting point of note. I think another one, and I'm not like a big guy for social media tattling, but I did see. I remember watching the Thursday night football and saying to the guys I was watching, I said, and you saw David Miller get on the sidelines, and I know you've got to make peace, and it's all an ecosystem, and you've got to be, on the best terms with everybody. But my point was, why have you let this guy in the building? Why have you given him a sideline pass to do his customary pictures with all these players? But anyway, since that night, Charles Menahu was dropped. Didn't play many snaps at Buffalo. Dropped from a starter. Didn't play many snaps. His snap reduced, and now he's a healthy scratch. So since that night, his agent was in the building. There may or may not have been a conversation happened at that point. He was very much looking. So he's gone from a starter, bit of kind of strange stuff with being third in the depth chart for the media department pushing that out there, or the operations department pushing it out there, and then now he's a healthy scratch. So it's quite from a guy who was tipped by most to be one of your top guys this year, or hopefully top guy. Look, he's limited. He can only play inside. He can't play the edge. He can't set the run. He's limited. He's good at long arms, kind of pushing, bull rushing guys back. That's about the maximum or the totality of his toolkit. So I can understand from a playing point of view why you've dropped him, but there's still potentially some development there. So a bit of a strange one, but I think he could potentially add to the list. Is Zach Cunningham and some other guys who, might not be, from a contract point, definitely won't be here next year, but might be guys that the team look to move on from, and again, perhaps not always to do 100% with football.
Menahu quote tweets this on Twitter and says, "Feel like I'm going through this now," and I'm just like, I mean, yes, it could be about anything. It's Twitter. He's a young guy. These younger guys use Twitter, in a lot different ways than. They try to mix messages and things like that. Oh, I wasn't talking about that. Why would you think I was talking about that? Look, he clearly fell out of favor for one reason or the other. I don't know if it's attitude. I don't know if they just think his play hasn't been good enough. This is a guy that is, you mentioned it, David Mulligetta, same agent as Deshaun Watson. I got to imagine that David Mulligetta does not have a positive overall feel and vibe for the Houston Texans. I don't know if that affects Charles Menahu's day-to-day. We talked to Charles Menahu after week 1 on the radio show, and the mentality, the mood, the idea was, hey, I want to be great. I want to be great for this team. I know I have things to improve upon. I want to get to a point where I am considered a guy that followed in some of the steps of the really good pass rushers here. I want people to wear my jersey to the stadium. And I was like, man, that's a great attitude. It's a great mentality. Well, maybe he hasn't put that into practice. The play wasn't bad enough that I think you needed to have him healthy and active, but that's clearly sending a message for one reason or the other. Attitude or play, snaps are down, then you're out, even though you could go. I don't know what the deal is. That's something to monitor, something to pay attention to. And it's not like, his coach is the former linebackers coach for this team. So it's not like the coach is totally new and unfamiliar with him. It's not like Lovey brought in a coach's defensive line point, like a position coach situation. Very weird situation. This is a guy that's expected to be a really good player for you this season. Had an incredible preseason. Incredible. And it hadn't paid off in the regular season for one way or the other. Something to monitor. I'd love to see you get corrected, get right, because when he's on, he's a nice football player. Yeah.
Any other guys that you think maybe on the way out, or you would take anything for?
You mentioned Zach Cunningham. See ya. I mean,
yeah. Some
of the stuff I've heard about what went on in the preseason, clearly a guy that's not buying in, got a disciplinary 1 quarter benching. Clearly a guy that's not bought in. They don't play him as much as
client as well.
Yeah, right. So there you go. So yeah, just not a guy that. And look, if I was Zach Cunningham, I wouldn't be bought in. When I signed my contract extension, this is not the team that I signed my contract extension for. I didn't sign my contract extension to be playing for a potentially 4-win football team, and you might have 4 wins in back-to-back years. That's not my. I signed my contract extension to be a leader of a defense that was really good, that had J.J. Watt in front of me, that had some growing young players behind me, that had some solid veterans around me, and that's not the team that he plays for now. So I can understand a little bit of the frustration. I do think if you don't like it, you could voice that opinion, be on board, and get out of there faster than maybe the route he's taken. But yeah, Cunningham's gone. If it's not this season, there's no way he plays a snap for the Texans in 2022.
Yeah, I think fiscally again, because we were just so desperate to sign, the myriad of vets that for 3 and 4 million here and there. I think he's another guy that, because of restructure, that he counts out of that. But yeah, I think there's definitely some more in the off season to come. I think you've got to think at this stage in terms of the landscape of this season. You've got to take anything in terms of guys that if you can, as you said, you can get 4th, 5th round picks. Take it every day of the week, because if you think last year you let Will Fuller walk out, you let JG walk out for nothing, and you've got the number of guys over the years. DJ Reader, you don't even get a comp pick for. He gets the highest paid at his position, but you blast a lot of money on Randall Cobb's contract only to trade him. So we're being so short of assets, and the culmination of assets, then all of a sudden that hits the end of the road at some point. And that's the spot we were in this off season. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be decided. In terms of, sorry, you go, Cody.
Well, you never know where that 4th round pick or that 5th round pick or just that extra middle round pick could come in handy, because if they make that Watson trade and they get an additional bunch of assets, let's say they get the 5 draft picks that they've been looking for. Well, you've got additional 1st round picks, and you're going to get those guys, and you're going to pay them, and you have 5 years to figure out if they're any good. But you're also going to get additional 2nd round picks. So maybe you want to use some of those 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks to move around in that 2nd round, or move around maybe in the 1st round to go get a position that you feel like you need. So just giving Caserio just a little bit more ammo to, even maneuver around after he gets 1st round picks, and maybe to maneuver around because you can't have 35 young guys, 1st and 2nd year players on the roster. You can't. That's not a recipe for success, even in the long term. Eventually down the road it might work. So you can't have as many young guys as they're going to have draft picks. So you want to maximize those draft picks. And if Cunningham gets you a 4th or a 5th, that you then package to take a 3rd, with a 3rd and a 2nd to move up in the 2nd round, to get a better player that you feel like it's okay to invest in those premium draft picks, and using a lesser draft pick to get you an even more premium draft pick is something I think Caserio will do. We saw it with Nico Collins. They felt like they had to have Nico Collins. They gave up a mid-round draft pick to move up in a round, to go get Nico Collins. I think he'll do that again in the future. So I think he needs the ammunition of even just, hey, if it's for that Cunningham. Okay, yeah, it's ammunition for me to move around and Nico Collins situation in the future.
You mentioned Tyler Labram earlier on. Is there any guys in the college? I mean, you're a big college football guy. Is any guys picture or caught your eye this year that you think, if the chance arises, 100% bring them in?
It's fascinating because I can't quite figure out exactly where the Texans are going to end up picking with their own pick, and so it's tough. I mean, if they end up 1-1, I don't know that there's going to be a quarterback that you want at 1-1. So then it's Thibodeau from Oregon. And so, of course, it's the Texans ending up with the number 1 overall pick, and the quarterbacks are like, so you take a defensive end. It's happened twice already. It happened with Mario, which actually Mario ended up being the right pick.
Yep.
And it happened with Clowney. And again, Clowney probably ended up being the right pick compared to the quarterbacks. Obviously, Khalil Mack was better. But it's very Texans to end up with, if they end up 1-1 and the best player's a defensive end, just makes hey, that's it. But if they end up, say picks 3 to 5, well, they're the defensive end from Michigan. Hutchinson is pretty good. He's going to get JJ Watt comparisons. He's not JJ Watt. Okay. A little bit different. He's going to get JJ Watt comparisons because he's a big white guy from the Big Ten who plays defensive end. The corner from LSU is going to miss the rest of the year. Stingley. Nice player. If you're in the top 10 with your own selection, that's not a bad selection. I mean, that guy's a baller. I know he's not playing this year because of an injury. That guy's a really good football player. The biggest thing is they could pick anything. There's literally any position. Yeah. Like if you want to pick Neal, the tackle from Alabama, and move Laramie Tunsil, I'm in. You want to pick a defensive end? I'm in. You want to pick Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame? I'm in. Depending on where you are in the top 10. You've seen cornerbacks and safeties pay off in recent drafts right off the bat. If Stingley's as good as those guys, that's a top 7 pick easy. Just go get him and lock down one side of the field, hope he's really, really good for you, and then just figure out the other parts. So they can do anything. If they want to draft a wide receiver in the first round, I'm fine with it. You gotta be a different type of guy than Nico Collins. I don't want too big, just go up and get it guys. A different type of guy. But, one of those Ohio State guys, Wilson and Olave. Okay, I'm fine with either one of those guys. But I'm assuming they're going to have 3 first-round picks, maybe 4, depending on what team ends up with Deshaun Watson. If it's just 1 first-round pick, if they can't move Watson for whatever reason, then you just go with the best player at the high-impact position. Maybe that's quarterback, maybe that's defensive end, maybe that's cornerback. But, with multiple first-round picks, pick whoever you want because you're hopefully going to get 3 really good players if you have multiple first-round picks.
Yeah, I suppose it makes the draft a lot exciting. You don't want to try and talk about too much of the draft, but it's good to touch upon it this season, I think, because it's you've got to look forward to it. Indianapolis this week, obviously they looked pretty good last night. Obviously Lamar had an all-time statistical performance to get by. Indeed, obviously the defense showed up. Carson Wentz threw 400 yards. You might be, even though it's on the short week, you might perhaps be getting him at the wrong time, and it might be another tough outing for Mills and all the kind of flaws we've talked about on this defense.
Look, if Jonathan Taylor gets going, I think that could be a rough one. This is not nearly the Colts team at all that we thought that they were going to see throughout the course of the season, obviously with the injuries and being banged up and things like that. But Pittman getting going, that's something scary because if they're throwing the ball, Pascal's basically always had a good game against the Texans for whatever reason. Wentz played okay. I mean, He's not bad. I mean, there's been bad Carson Wentz. He's not bad right now. I thought he would be pretty bad at this point, with some of the injuries and some of the difficulties that they've dealt with. And really a fascinating conversation around sort of I wanted Matt Eberflus to be the head coach of this football team. I mean, that's who I wanted, the Colts defensive coordinator. They've been a little iffy on defense at different times. Certainly, last night letting the thing get away from them on the defensive side of the football. I think that's a cool storyline. It's going to be a tough task. There's no weather associated. The weather definitely offense in Buffalo. No weather, you're in a dome. Solid team, well-coached team. They don't give you a lot of opportunities to take advantage of their mistakes. This is a Colts team that's pretty tough. It's going to be a tough task. But if you beat the Colts on Sunday, it means as much, maybe more, because a road win against a division rival that we believe is much better than you, that would go a long, long way in a fair amount for this team. These games are going to start meaning less if the losses keep stacking up, but showing that you're going in the right direction with a victory against Indianapolis would go a long way for this organization.
Yeah, I think I keep going back to last season at the home game against the Colts, and we just got chewed up front by Buckner and Grover Stewart and all these kind of guys, and I think and even the guy Il Muhammad, I think his name is, I'm sure he whipped Tunsil a couple of times as well. So I think that's something to watch in terms of could they just get too much pressure up front, and Mills might have a similar day to what he had in Buffalo, because I think that's the concern, because they've definitely got their strength up front. But as you said, they've not been the team that we thought they were going to be this season. It might be Mills' last thing, but where do you stand, just to finish us off, Cody, where do you stand on the Mills Tyrell thing? Would you bring him back, or do you just give Mills as much game time as he can take until you've got an overriding reason that you just got to take him out, or what have you?
This is such a cop-out answer. I think it's week to week. Let's see how Davis Mills performs with a little pressure behind him. Hey, go out there, play well, and if you don't play well, we're going back to the veteran. And he's going to get it for a few weeks, and you're going to get to watch how it should be done. It's supposed to be done. You're going to get to see him make mistakes and learn from his mistakes. You're going to get to see him succeed and learn from how he does things right. So I would basically let Davis Mills know you've got to play well every week to keep your job. It's competition right off the bat. Let's see how you handle competition. And that's how I would do it. I wonder if because he's a veteran, he's been a good teammate, it's just automatically Tyrod's job. But if Davis Mills does what he did against the Patriots, against the Colts, it's really hard to go back to Tyrod. Because even though Tyrod played some of the best football of his career for 6 quarters, you got to find out about Mills long term. You can go back to Mills and hope that improves the overall potential of Mills.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's yeah, as you said, it is a week to week league, and we'll find out. The final image of Easterby hanging over Culley there with a rather sort of ominous scowl, I think, was probably one thing that you saw in the broadcast. Kind of a PR disaster against his former team.
Hey, does Jack Easterby know that you should have let him score? Because if he did, and he told David Culley, like, maybe they'd had a better chance to win the football game or at least tie the football game. It's like, hey, if Easterby knows that you're supposed to let him score, I'm fine with him being there. But yeah, certainly with the controversial nature of his name around this organization, it's not great seeing him hanging around on the sidelines.
I just had I was just kind of, we were joking watching it, and it was, you saw him kind of stare at him as he was kneeling down for the jumped up pastor that he is. We were, you know, the sentiment, certainly when we were watching it, was that he's got that knife set in that top drawer in his desk, and he was away to go and start sharpening them up because he looked like he was either he was confused because he doesn't have a fucking clue what's going on out there, which I think sometimes is the case, or he was pissed off that he didn't get one over his former team again, and it looked like it was a jot on the copybook of David Culley. Not that he was ever going to be long term. But certainly it didn't do him any favours, and I don't think Easterby much appreciated it. And I know he's the most controversial figure you'll ever have, but he's certainly got one that's got influence, and I think if he's unhappy about it, it'll make its way back to Tommy Boy. I think that's for sure.
So the Tommy Boy thing with Cal McNair makes me laugh so much. One of my favorite movies. I always tell people, Tommy Boy saved the company at the end. So maybe Cal can save this all when it's all said and done. Maybe Caserio can be the David Spade and help him save everything. So Tommy Boy saved the company at the end. So it's funny, and yes, it has not looked good. And maybe we're in the middle of when he's lighting the guy's toy car on fire in the office. But Tommy Boy saved the company at the end. So hopefully Cal's got him pointed in the right direction, and David Spade Casario's is helping him out in the right way.
Yeah, well, when you see that many empty seats and it's actually picked up on the broadcast, it's empty. You hopefully got to start, and how loud it was when on that Hunter Henry touchdown, which is, you don't really hear that all that often, or you haven't in recent times. You've got to think at some point, when there's continual losses, when there's been all this culture and there's all this veteran players and there's been all this, we'll do it our way, you're losing the quarterback, they will view it as transition. But hopefully it twigs somewhere, I think, and then but it's a foolproof model, isn't it? I mean, he makes money regardless of if let's say there's 4,000 or 5,000 empty seats that haven't been paid for. It's just maybe if he takes notice of the 15,000, 20,000 seats that were sitting empty for all 4 quarters.
The pseudo positive, I guess, for that standpoint is I don't think you play a lot of fan bases that travel well for the rest of the year. So hopefully you don't have a ton of opposing forces cheering really loud, kind of like when the Patriots were having success. I mean, I don't see the Rams, Chargers, any AFC South teams, the Jets or the Seahawks being, good traveling fan bases in there. So, but maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe you want the opposing team cheering, and Cal McNair has to hear that and knows that maybe he's made some mistakes. That's the big thing, is people are convinced at different times that they don't know they've made mistakes. I think when he looks and sees the empty seats, he's got to know he's made mistakes.
Yeah, I think so. I suppose it will be empty next year, and it'll be empty the year after. I think, when does that arrest itself?
I mean, you get the right quarterback in here, man. And
you fill the place, yeah.
That's a reason for people to come to the joint. But I don't know about the right quarterback. It seems like it might be a tough task to find.
Yeah. Do you think the Bama guy's real? Would you wait a year and pick him if it all kind of falls into place? Would that be an ideal scenario?
I like him a little bit more than basically anybody else in this year's draft, but I'm also under the opinion of Yeah, you can wait and hope that he's thing. The next big thing was Tua. Justin Herbert went a couple picks later. He's way better. So just get the right guy. No Whenever contest, you feel like it's the right guy, get the right guy. You think it's Matt Corral this year? Go get Matt Corral. If you think it's Malik Willis, go get Malik Willis. So go get the right guy when you think it's the right guy. But also, don't just draft a quarterback just to draft a quarterback. Like, you got to think and know this is our dude, and be ready to invest in him.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I think it's all poised for future years. But hopefully, this hour and everybody else out there talking about this team can make it a little bit easier. But Cody Stoots, thank you very much for your time, mate. Much appreciated. Always enjoy having you join us. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, on Twitter, like it, share it, subscribe it. Do all that good stuff to help people find the Turn Up for What podcast, which is continuing to keep us a name as we go through this kind of strange season. But Cody, thank you very much for your time. If you haven't already, check out the stuff on podcasttexans.com, and we'll catch you again next week. Cody, last words before we head out of here?
Hey, always a pleasure, man. Always appreciate chopping it up. Nice relaxed environment. We can get granular. We can do big picture stuff. And hey, kick off to the new century. Everybody's got to beat me. I'm the best podcast so far in the new century of episodes. So everybody's got to be better than me going forward, 102 and beyond. Okay.
That's it. Yeah, no, set a high bar for us here. So Cody, thanks very much for your time, and everybody listening, thanks again. We'll be back next week to talk Indianapolis and whatever may be as we get ready, as we're approaching the dreaded bye week trade deadline. But thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you again next week.